want to start out by talking a little bit about the legal and constitutional framework of this issue, because I think the bottom line is this is not about the government and trying to defend women against the church. This is about individuals who care about religious freedom in general and care about our fundamental freedoms as well, standing up for religious freedom, whether you agree or disagree with the church's teaching on contraception in this case, whether you follow it or don't. This is about the freedom of religion at root. When our founding fathers were designing the Constitution, they had it very clearly in mind, trying to create a government that would withstand the constant, almost gravitational pull toward tyranny. They had just finished throwing off a tyranny. They didn't want to create a government that would fall into the same trap. And they understood that as fallen human beings, any government created by men is going to have that tendency. So their model for doing that was to have specific limitations in the government of two types. One is structural limitations. They said people go to the government with all of their natural human rights intact. We don't have rights that come from the government that, they give us the right to freedom, they give us the right to speech. No, we naturally, inherently as human beings have those rights. We cede certain aspects of those rights to the government insofar as they need to be able to function to operate as governments need to do for our national defense, in particular, for some of the major areas that the government is necessary in. But we don't just sit around waiting for rights to come to us from the government. We have them, and we only give them up in certain limited quantities. So they created a government that had limitations on what the government could do in the first place. So our government doesn't just have a mandate of go and do good in the name of people. Go and create laws that will be good for people. There is specific enumerated powers the federal government has. And by creating only enumerated powers, the founders thought this is the way we can limit what government will do. They can't be involved in as many dangerous things if they only are doing the specific tasks that a government can do. So it's things like, as I mentioned, national defense. We've got national bankruptcy laws. We need to have that. We need to have something moderating the interstate commerce activity, so states aren't having tariffs against each other, so we can function as a union. Things like that are necessary for a national government. Then there's another type of rights that the framers of the Constitution decided to include. And this was actually a big debate. They said, should we even include a list of rights the government can't transgress? We're basically saying you have all these rights anyway. You're reserving them. But they decided it's going to be crucial to also list certain rights that no matter what else the government thinks it's doing in your favor, there's certain fundamental rights that it's not going to transgress. And the first right they decided to include in that Bill of Rights was the right to freedom of religion, that the government is going to respect the freedom of religion, is not going to establish a religion. There also, of course, are free speech rights and so on, and a lot of important rights of our safety from search, and some fundamental rights where the government's not going to be able to treat you as inappropriately in a criminal justice system, et cetera. These are really fundamental rights to making sure we don't run into a tyrannical government. But the first one they included in there was freedom of religion. Now, a problem that we're seeing, I think, in our nation today is people who, from my view, have a much greater trust in government than our founding fathers did. So they didn't think you could just find some good people, let them take over and say, trust me, we'll do the right thing. That's why we have our Constitution in the first place. We don't have something like a lot of nations that, until recently have had, where the Parliament could change the laws or anything. We have a Constitution that can't be changed except for jumping over very high procedural hurdles. And that's because this is supposed to be the last line of defense. We don't just trust the government. Nowadays, I think we see a lot of people who are saying, well, the government has all these great things they can do, but the Constitution is getting in its way. And we have to understand that the Constitution is there sometimes purposely to get in the way, so that the only limited functions it's doing are these national things. The other functions of government can be left to state and local government, where it's much more directly responsible to the people who've elected their officials. They then if they start getting out of line, the idea is the people are going to be much more able to restrain them and pull them back. That's a very Catholic idea as well, of subsidiarity, of the task of government should be operating on the lowest level possible, because then you do have that connection to the people and the responsiveness. If we view the government as the Constitution is getting in the way of our grand plans for the world, then we're having a problem. And that's unfortunate what we've seen throughout this healthcare discussion. Because, of course, all of us want to have affordable good health care for our nation. But when one says, I've got this plan that's so good that we need to now overwhelm the constitutional limits on our government to do it, it's just that good, we need to step back and think very seriously about this. The one aspect in which it's done that is the structural limits in the Constitution. That doesn't go specifically to this mandate, but I think it's related because you have the government saying, trust us, we have this authority that we can force you to buy a product. That's nowhere in the Constitution. There's the power to regulate commerce among the states, but they've said, well, we can force you to get into the commerce between the states in the first place. But once you have the government forcing you to buy a product, you have to acknowledge that it's going to be generally on the government's terms, not on your own. And once the government says we can force you to buy a product, it's understandable that the government then determines the outlines and limits of what that product is going to be. That, from a constitutional perspective, is bad enough because it goes beyond the structural limits. But what President Obama did with this mandate is that he took it to the next step and went beyond even the additional limits of the Bill of Rights. So said, we can not only force you to buy a product that you weren't buying before, that you didn't buy before, and determine the outlines of that product, but we can force you to buy a product that violates your own conscience. That is the definition of tyranny, to say that we have the power over you. The government has the authority to force you to violate your own conscience. And that's what they've done in this mandate. So we need to recognize that the Bill of Rights has that limit for a fundamental reason, not because everyone in the country agrees that contraception is a moral evil and is damaging women and as well as men, but for the same reason that we respect any rights of conscience. For the same reason that we should all be up here having the same debate if the law were outlawing, say, circumcision. Maybe they could say, oh, there's medical beliefs that this is actually not as good as we thought. We can outlaw it now because there's risks involved in it and we don't see there's benefits. But no, we should all be sitting up here having the same debate and having the same defense if it was defending the right of Jewish people to circumcise their child, of a Jewish deli to carry pork, of a Muslim woman to wear a head covering. We should be up here defending these same rights, regardless of what the reasoning was.